Welcome to Bound by Books. I'm one of your hosts, Sherri Hayes, and I am joined today with Marianne and Maria. How are you, Marianne?
I am fine. I feel like, somebody put baby in the corner here in my office, but that's if you're watching us on YouTube, you can see I'm literally in the corner of my office. So it's because the lighting in here stinks and it's either blinding or it's too dark that I'm too much in silhouette. So, but
oh, that's okay. They're here to listen to us talk, not look at how it looks. Oh, well, how have you been, Marianne? You just got back, right?
Yes.
From a trip?
I was in Savannah at the Literary Love Convention, and it was a success. I sold a lot of books, sold a lot of bookware, actually made connections with author friends, met a couple of new authors, newbie authors and new readers, and also my one clickers, that are there. So it was an all around success. So yes, very, very happy with the results, and the fact that I came back healthy is a good thing, because some other people weren't so lucky. So, but that's an aside. So anyway, I'm still recuperating.
That's awesome.
Yeah, because I'm still trying to get over the travel. Traveling is tough, especially because I drove to Savannah, and it's a long drive. It's like supposed to only be 14 hours, but it was turned out to be like 16 or 17 with all the stops, because I've got the bladder of a squirrel, so I have to make stops every couple of hours to tinkle.
Unfortunately, that is one of the downsides of getting older, because I have definitely noticed that I take a lot more potty breaks as I've gotten older.
Breaks. That's very, very
cute. Than what I have. Yeah. Well, I have not been traveling. I am now in deadline crunch time. I scheduled my editor 4 months ago, and I now have about 3.5, 4 weeks to get about 30,000 words done.
Oh, you're in my world. Yeah, I was trying to turn off the light because it was blaring on me. I was having a hot flash. So, well, I mean, I know what that's like. Hostage deadlines, absolutely. Hostage deadlines are not fun. You'll get it done.
I was hoping that I'm still working on it. I've got until the my editor is supposed to take over on the 17th of August. So I have until then to get it done, but I would like a few days to let go back and be able to do some tweaking if I need to, and we'll see how that goes. I may be going to the absolute deadline here, the way things goes. I was hoping not to do this. I hate being that pressed on a deadline. It's not something I enjoy, but our woodworking business has been so busy this last month that it just kept pushing. I was so exhausted. I was like, oh, I just know writing is just not going to get done today. And so I was like, I'll just work on it tomorrow. And then tomorrow would come and it would literally be a repeat of the day before. And I'm just like, this is not good.
Yeah, you just got to push through.
I got to do
push
this.
Through.
So
if anybody
it is what it is.
If anybody could talk to you about hostage deadlines, it is me and Tina Moss. Because it's like we always.
Tina is insane.
Yeah.
Tina is absolutely insane. I mean, you're not much better, but Tina is insane. I mean, she will write a 50,000 word novel in 2 weeks. And I'm like, you're crazy, girl.
Yeah,
you're crazy.
Well, I left.
No.
I left Jeepers Reapers. I had the last 21,000 words that I had 20,000 words that I had to write in a week. So, I mean, people, there are people who are like, oh, that's not so bad. That's just 3,000 words a day. Well, 3,000 words a day when you still don't know the end of the book because you're a pantster. So anyway, let's get to it.
That's it. I think that is a good point. It is a little bit different if you're a pantser versus a plotter, because that does go into it. But yeah, let's let's get to our topic today, because it's not pantsing or plotting or hostage deadlines. It is blurbs. We're going to be talking all about blurbs today. What are some good things that you need to do to make your blurb pop and stand out? And what are some things you maybe should avoid?
Well, I mean, for those of you out there who don't know, a blurb is the story synopsis, little teaser on the back of the book. And it is basically your entire story distilled down to 250 words or less. Now, there are some people who will argue that point, that they will write longer. I am guilty of that. Right here, raises my hand and hangs my head in shame. I have written longer blurbs, and I have tried to pack them full of information and basically tell the whole story. And you don't have to do that. And the reason why we're talking about this today is because we have the benefit of Sherri Hayes, who is our blurb maven. So I am going to turn it over to Sherri, and I'm just going to sit here like a sponge and absorb it all. So take it away, Ms. Sherri.
Oh my goodness. Well, first of all, I will say it is a lot easier for me to help other authors with their blurbs than it is to write my own. Because I do, and I think it's just because I don't know their story as well as I know my own. And it's the common issue that all authors have, because we understand our story so well that we're trying to explain it to a potential reader. And it's just hard to take in, 50,000, 80,000, 100,000 word novel and essentially chop it down and explain it in 250 words or less.
Right.
It's so overwhelming.
And explain it in a way that has a hook, because you have to put the most exciting, grab the reader by their face type of information in that blurb, so that they'll want to pick up the book and actually read the first chapter and then see if they like it. Normally I think people, they look at the cover, it's like, ooh, that's pretty. Ooh, that looks great. And then they look at the cover, and then they turn it over and they read the blurb. And if they like the blurb, 9 times out of 10, they're going to buy the book, provided it's not, you're charging $40 for a mass market paperback. The price has to be right as well. But, it's a very important thing. And there are certain elements that have to go into a blurb, and I'm going to let Sherri explain them. I am totally putting this on you, girl.
I noticed that. The first thing I would say with a blurb, that the biggest mistake I would say that most writers make with a blurb, and I'm not immune to this, I usually have to rewrite a blurb at least 5 times before I come up with a blurb that I'm actually happy with, that I want to put out there for readers to do, which is not a bad thing. I took a class from a business coach. Her name is Marie Florleo, if you're familiar with her. She's a very famous business coach. And she actually has a class called the Copy Cure. And she recommends, she was talking specifically about websites, but it's the same basic principle. She says you need to write your copy, which is what your blurb is, it's copy. You need to write your copy 23 times before you actually can narrow it down and tweak it so you get the maximum amount of impact and the right verbiage and everything to do. Now, I don't typically take 23 times.
That's a lot.
That is a lot. And I in my view is, we are writers. That's what we do.
Yes.
That's our craft. So in theory, we should be able to tweak that faster than 23 times.
Yes.
But the basic principle does still stay the same. Mm-hmm. Your first draft of your blurb is probably not going to be, or not what you should be, what you put out there.
No, it's your foundation.
It is. It's the foundation. It's just to kind of, honestly, it's word vomit. Your first draft should be word vomit. Let's just get it out there. What do you think your book is about? If you had to try to condense it into 250 words and see what it comes up with, then you need to kind of break it down. One of the biggest mistakes I see authors making, especially newbie authors, is they pack so much plot into things. Like they try to do like, well, this happens and then this happens and then this happens and then this happens into their blurb. And quite frankly, that's boring. I mean, it just is. It's boring. First of all, your potential reader knows nothing of your characters. They don't know anything about your characters. Are your characters bubbly? Did they go through some major trauma? How did they end up in this situation that they found themselves in? And why should I, as a potential reader, care? I don't know them, but why should I care? Because you need to make me care. As a potential reader, you need to make me care. Which is why a big rule of thumb is lead with emotion. And I think that's something that you and I have been kind of working on with your blurbs, and you've been working with Tina on with your blurbs, Marianne, right? Is leading with that emotion, right?
Right. Because because my books tend to have a lot of humor in them as well. But they also have a lot of violence and trauma as well. So I try to strike a balance with that, but I have been guilty of putting too much information in. And, when somebody, I can see through my mind's eye, some of you guys out there saying 250 words, you're like recoiling at thinking that's not going to be enough. Well, when you think about the average number of words that is on a page in a paperback, it's anywhere from 250 to 350 words on a paperback, depending on font size. And we all know that readers do not like it when you make your font size minuscule, to try and keep your the size of your book, being less meaty, so that they won't think it's like this giant tome, they're not walking around with an encyclopedia. But erring on the side of 300 words max. If 250 gives you, hives, you can raise it to 300, but you have to make sure that you hit all the points that Sherri is talking about, and trust me, I've been at this game for a long time, and it's the blurb is the hardest thing in my mind to write. I would rather write the whole book than write the blurb.
Yeah, the blurbs definitely take more finesse than the book does, because the book, you can take your time and explain and set up a situation. You can't do that with a blurb. It has to be in your face, wowing the reader in 250 words or less. You cannot spend, a page or 2 pages or 5 pages explaining something.
No.
Case in point, my Finding Anna series is a very complex story. Okay. It is extremely complex. It deals with a young woman who was held captive as a sex slave against her will, is rescued, has all this trauma and PTSD and everything. I cannot spend 2 pages explaining that for a blurb. I have to break it down. And what do? You break it down by talking about the feelings, the emotions, how she views herself. And the way I did my blurb for that is, she feels she's a slave, she's worthless. And I had to convey that into a blurb, and it touches people. It makes them want to know about this young woman who feels like nothing. What happens to her?
Yep.
And it draws them in. And that's what you're looking for in a blurb. That's what you want it to do. You want it to leave the reader with enough questions that they are going to want to pick up your book and say, I have to find out what happens next. I have to read it. I have to find it out.
Well, the other things that we had mentioned, because that's the overarching goal, but there are certain
Yep.
other things that have to go into it as well. We have mentioned it in the past, is keywords have to be put in blurbs, that the trope has to be mentioned in blurbs, and that
Mhm.
it has to match the book's genre. Because we said already, lead with emotion and keeping it snappy, 250 words or or less. I
Mhm.
know I gave them the extra 50, but that's just me. um, but keywords and tropes and match the book genre, those things are just as important, because if somebody is looking
They
for,
are.
I write paranormal romance, urban fantasy romance, paranormal women's fiction romance, and I do have a couple of YA, and I'm going to be getting into paranormal cozy mysteries shortly, as well as historic fiction. So, yeah, there's a lot of hats floating around above my head. So each one of the blurbs for these particular books has to match the genre.
Keywords are very important, like Marianne said, and more so as far as algorithms go with the different various retailers than with the reader themselves, although it can be important to the reader as well. Case in point, when the book I'm currently writing is a May to December romance, there's a 23-year age gap between my hero and my heroine. I needed to make sure in my blurb somewhere, I made it very clear that it was an age gap romance. I needed to make that clear because it will make a difference in who the different retailers, what type of readers the retailers show my book to when it's released. And it will also make it clear if somebody is on the fence, if a reader is on the fence, they read your blurb and they're like, it sounds like I might like this. If there's keywords in there of books, the types of books they love, whether that is a brother's best friend romance, an office romance, a firefighter romance, it doesn't matter if whatever that is, whatever that trope is, the genre, the trope, all those things need to somehow be whittled and weaved into your blurb so that it tells the right information to the right people, because you want to get the right readers. That's another
Absolutely.
thing that
Yes.
we probably should talk about. Blurbs will help you get the right readers to read your book, because if the wrong readers read your book, you could end up with a slew of 1 and 2 star reviews.
Unfortunately, yes.
Even if your book is great, even if it's a really, really strong book, and if you, okay, perfect example. I had a book years and years ago, and it was years ago, so even if you asked me what the title was, I would not remember the name of it. But it was marketed as a romance. The blurb read as a romance. I read this thing and it was not a romance. Was it a good women's fiction story? Yes. Was it a good romance? No. And when you looked at the reviews, you could tell. I knew, because I was an author, I knew the industry, I know how things work. They had a lot of 1 and 2 star reviews on this book, and every single one of them were complaining about it not being a romance. Every single one of them. And so this author, unfortunately, she was traditionally published, which means it probably wasn't her call as to how she marketed the book. But somebody made a very bad call, in my opinion, to market that book as a romance, because it put her, I got the book into probably the hands of more readers, but they weren't the right readers. So that you don't want that either, especially if you are an indie, because first of all, I will probably never read a book by that author again, just because I'm never going to be sure about what I'm getting. If I'm going to think that that's the book, you know what I'm saying? If you're presented that the book is going to be this way and it turns out to be another way, it breaks that trust between the author and the reader.
Correct. I mean, you don't have to, I mean, there's ways to like one of the tropes that happens a lot in my books is enemies to lovers or strangers to lovers. You know, people who have some kind of little bit of animosity or a mistrust of each other, and then it builds, and then they end up, you know, hooking up, you know, one way or the other. You don't have to actually say friends to lovers, but I would think you would, like maybe in the last line of your blurb saying, you know, this paranormal romance friends, this paranormal friends to lovers romance, or enemies to lovers romance, you know, is a journey that will leave you breathless or something like that. You know, you could put that at the very last line of your book, so that the genre and the trope are crystal clear right there. The other way is you could say, you know, that they don't like each other, you know, that they've just that they you know, they maybe they work together, or maybe they're thrown, you know, forced proximity, you know, being able, you know, being forced to work together, and that they don't like each other. And so that'll speak to it, but you can also make it very clear in that last line of the blurb. And that last line of the blurb doesn't actually have to be connected to the blurb. It can be done underneath as a single line underneath it, you know, because I have done that before. But the other thing we talked about is keywords. Well, what is a keyword? A keyword is a way for the algorithms on Amazon and Apple and Kobo and, you know, Nook and every other place you could buy an ebook. And like for me in my paranormals, you know, vampire, if it's a vampire book, I got to use the word vampire. You know, I have to use the word romance. I have to use the word, you know, some, you know, like redemption or absolution, or, you know, trapped in darkness or something like that, that would speak to the fact that this is a vampire fiction or a vampire romance. If it's witchy, use the word witch, use the word, you know, use the word magic, you know, that type of thing. Those keywords are really, really important. And I think, Sherri, wouldn't you agree, from all of our research and so forth, that you should try for a minimum of 8 and a maximum of 15 keywords?
I honestly think that it depends. You do need keywords in there. I would say minimum of 5.
Minimum of 5.
And the only reason I say that is just because blurbs have gotten shorter over the years. And because when I first started writing, blurbs were 350 words. That was kind of the standard. You always had a shorter blurb, about 75 words, just for like those short little snippets, usually for like blog tours and things like that. But the blurb that went on your book, that went on Amazon and Barnes Noble and all that, it was 350 words. Well, now we've basically chopped 100 words off of that. And the trick is, when you're putting in keywords, if you have to choose between a keyword and the emotion, in my opinion, you pick the emotion every time. Because
there might be a way for you to be able to do both in the same sentence.
Oh yeah, if you can do both, great. That's the ideal scenario. But if you get into a position where you have to choose between the emotion and the keyword, it's better to put the emotion in the blurb and then just pack the keywords into a separate paragraph at the bottom. Like, if you like this, you know, this, and this, then you will love this. And right there, you've got 4 keywords. You could put 4 keywords in there. And so you only really have to fit 1 or 2 up in the blurb, the actual body of the blurb.
Right.
So you're able to balance it out, but you don't want to lose the emotion, because if you just pack your keywords just to put them in there, in the blurb, you could lose
keyword
the
stuffing. Yeah, keyword stuffing is also against terms of service for a lot of the ebook things. I guess 15 words, what, like I had mentioned before, was from when I was reading, like, you know, taking the marketing toolbox class. It was for when people who had longer blurbs, you know, that you needed to use them. So yeah, 5 to 8. 5 to 8 would probably be considering the limit that we're talking about of 250 words. 5 to 8 would probably be a safe bet for you to be able to have, but you have to have at least 5, or else the reader might meet it.
Oh yeah.
Reader might skip it because sometimes they just scan, they just skim the blurb, but those words will pop out at them. So
right, but that is not hard to do when you start breaking it down, because again, you typically, when you're writing a blurb, you have a headline. That's the first 1-sentence line, maybe 2 sentences, but usually 1-sentence line at the top. It's almost always bolded, not always, but almost always bolded. That should give the reader a clear idea of the type of book. So you should have a trope in there, or something of that nature.
Yep.
And it should say what the genre is. So they should know if it's a romance, it's going to be a romance. If it's sci-fi, they should know it's going to be sci-fi just by reading that one line. They should know that. Then if you write the body of the blurb, focus on your emotion, and then you have those 4 keywords down there, you've got your 5 right there. And if you want to stick 1 or 2 more in the body of if you can stick 1 or 2 more in the body of the blurb itself, you're set.
Yep.
And that's not that hard to do. It sounds overwhelming when you're thinking, oh, you've got to put 5 to 8 keywords, in your blurbs and fit that into 250. But when you break it down like that, it's not
hard to do.
Daunting.
Yeah. And you don't have to be so like hit them over the head with your first that pull out sentence at the headline type. Like for Jeepers Reapers, my paranormal women's fiction, my headline was not the start to 40 I expected. So that should, I mean, that right there tells the reader that the main character is 40 plus. So therefore, this is a women's fiction, because the main character is older. But in case they aren't sure, then that's when you start the main body of it with all the particulars that you need.
Right. So you just kind of have to play it down. But sometimes if you're overwhelmed by writing a blurb, it's helpful to break it down like that, to say, okay, in the headline needs to accomplish this, and then the body needs to accomplish this, and then the last paragraph needs to accomplish this, and then you have a call to action. That's the other thing we need to talk about too. The last thing you should put as part of your blurb is a call to action. And this is something that is not just specific to a blurb, but is pretty much specific to marketing in general.
Yes.
One thing that I have learned has been drilled into my head over the last several years is that if you want a reader to buy your book, you actually need to ask them to buy your book. So don't assume that they're going to just, if it's a nice blurb, they're going to buy your book. That's just not how consumers are anymore. It's why you go into a store and they have, get this for, this, or limited time offer. They're trying to entice, and asking somebody to actually, click here or buy this, purchase this, grab this, those type of words, those action words will actually help. And it needs to be how you close out your blurb. You need to actually ask them to follow through, take an action, and give them that little extra bit to do it. I know on my Serpent's Kiss series, it's a BDSM series. So I usually say buy and then the title of the book, and get your kink on today, or something like that, or get your kink on, or whatever. But it's specific, it's very tailored to the book, and it's fun. It accomplishes all the goals. It's a call to action. It reiterates the title of the book. It's specific to the book because it talks about getting their kink on, and it's fun. Yep. So that's it's kind of breaking it down like that is the best way to really make blurbs
work. I usually end mine with a question about the character's journey, and then the words "care to come along."
Yeah.
that type of a thing. It doesn't have to be a buy this book now type of a thing. It can be much more subtle, much more enticing that way.
Yeah.
Right. But it gets the point across.
Right. Exactly. Well, if you have not listened to last week's episode of the podcast, I would encourage you to do that. Tina Moss and I were talking all about marketing a series. We do talk a little bit about blurbs in that episode as well. And we actually go into a little more detail on tailoring a blurb specifically for the different retailers, because retailers do require different things, which makes writing blurbs all the more fun.
Yep.
So if you haven't checked that out, I would highly encourage you to do so. And Marianne, you've been really working on your blurbs. I know you and I have worked together. I know you and Tina have worked together a little bit on this. But blurbs are kind of ever evolving.
They are. They're ever evolving. And, sometimes you think that you've got it down, and then you go back and you wonder why there's a disconnect between your ad and your, having people click through that ad to your retail page. And then there, even if you got them to that point where there's a click-through rate to your retail page, and then there's a disconnect there that it doesn't lead to a sale, because you figure, okay, your ad on Facebook or Amazon or wherever you're advertising is up against scads of other ads. Okay, but yours caught this reader's eye. They read the ad copy, they looked at your graphic, they liked the headline, they clicked learn more or shop now or whatever call to action you use as your button, and they click it, it takes them to your retail page, whether it's on Amazon, whether it's on your website or wherever. And your retail page there will have your book cover, it'll have your blurb, your headline, and author notes or what have you, and it dies there. Well, 9 times out of 10, it dies there because your blurb hasn't caught their eye enough, or it's too long and they skim it and they're like, meh, and they just decide that this isn't for me. So no matter how
marketing.
Yep.
It is
no matter
marketing.
what kind of bells and whistles you put on your retail page, the A+ content with all the fun graphics, or even a small little, like a video or what have you, it's the main thing is the blurb, that you can put there to catch them. So, and used to be little tips and tricks you could do using Yay Text and the Amazon blurb generator and so forth, where you could put stars or check marks or change the color of the font or the size of the font. Those were third party, and Amazon eventually brought the hammer down and was just like, no, this is gaming the system here. We don't like this. It's circumventing the terms of service. So anyway, that didn't work. I mean, if you happen to manage to get it through and you've got a blurb that's working, that Amazon hasn't caught that stuff, don't ever tell them. All right, leave it alone. But at the same time, 9 times out of 10, it doesn't work there. So the onus then falls on you to make your words work for you.
Yeah, the first thing a potential reader is going to look at is your cover. The second is your blurb. Right. And so if you've got them, if you've gained their interest with the cover, the blurb is where you really need to nail down the deal. Right. Yeah, you need to seal the deal with that blurb. And that's why it is so important.
Right.
So I hope that you have enjoyed our podcast today and that you've learned all about blurbs and maybe got some helpful tips and tricks on making your own blurb better. And please tune in next week to see what new topic we will be discussing. Until then, bye.
Bye.
Wait! Before you go, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and check us out on our website, boundbybookspodcast.com.